Hey Bethlehem, this is Pastor Paul. This past Sunday, we continued on with our sermon series entitled Together as we have examined the importance of being united and living together as a community. One of God's expectations is that His people would be people who grow, people who mature, people who are strengthened. And the good news is that God doesn't leave us out there to fend for ourselves. He doesn't expect us to figure out this maturing process on our own. Rather, God provides what we need for growth. The Apostle Paul talks about this in the book of Ephesians. So we've been hitting some highlights in this letter that Paul wrote. This letter Paul wrote while he was in prison. And it's a circular letter. He wrote it to be read by many different churches. And therefore, it addresses some general church issues rather than specific issues that plagued a specific church. And one of the issues that Paul talks about is this idea of spiritual maturity, spiritual formation, spiritual growth. And Paul says in Ephesians chapter 4 that there are two provisions that God gives us for our growth. And the first one is that God provides us with leadership. In Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11, he writes, "Now these are the gifts Christ gave to the church, the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, and the pastors and teachers. Their responsibility is to equip God's people to do His work and build up the church, the body of Christ." Paul says that God has provided leadership for the church. He's provided the apostles, and we're still led by the apostles through the Bible. He has provided evangelists, people who go out and tell others about the good news of God's kingdom. He's provided pastors and teachers to help support the local church. We need leadership if we're going to grow. We need the teaching of the truth. We need a vision of where we're going as a people and what we are to be doing. Leadership is essential to growth and to maturity. The second provision that God gives to us, according to Paul, is that of community. In verse 15, he says, "Instead, we will speak the truth in love, growing in every way more and more like Christ, who is the head of His body, the church." So we are part of the church, part of this community. And in this community, Paul says we are to speak to each other the truth in love. We're to encourage one another. We're to help one another. We're to remind people of God's promises and of God's love. We're to help one another. And so as we talk, as we share our stories, as we share our testimonies, and as we share our insights, we help one another along this path of spiritual formation, of spiritual growth, and we grow stronger together. But what's interesting here is that in the end, Paul says, hey, it's God that brings us together. In verse 16, he writes, "He makes the whole body fit together perfectly." See, we have leadership when we have community, and God takes those two provisions, He takes those two gifts, and He uses those to grow us. In the end, that it's God that gives us the growth. And so our big idea is that God strengthens us as we help one another follow Jesus. God strengthens us. He matures us as we help one another. And so our challenge this week is to pray that God would fill us with the wisdom and strength we need to honor Jesus. That God would provide what we need to honor Jesus with our lives. Hey, I hope to see you on Sunday. We're going to have a potluck. It's going to be it's the first Sunday of the month, so it's our combined service. So I hope to see you there. I hope that you'll be encouraged. Keep on growing, keep on being strengthened, and God bless.